The paper is thin, smelling of old rain. Typewriter ink curls where someone struck too fast, as if speed could outrun death. Top margin, Guadalcanal, Henderson Field. In the body, patrol of 7 failed to return, 4 recovered. You can feel the page flex. Reports should make sense. This one is arithmetic with missing faces. September 27, 1942, 0900 hours. Lieutenant Colonel William Whaling stands by the airstrip, watching stretchers pass like slow boats. 1, 2, 3, and a 4th. A 7-man patrol went out at dawn. 4 came back. The math is louder than the airplanes. The file doesn't say how the jungle sounds when it closes behind you. Here, 10 feet can be forever. Machine guns wait until you've already walked past. The Japanese own the undergrowth. 2 months into Guadalcanal, Marines still fight by the book. The book doesn't know this kind of green. It doesn't know that courage is noisy and noise is fatal. You can be brave and invisible, or brave and dead. Whaling wasn't supposed to be here. 2 days earlier, he was relieved as executive officer of the 5th Marines. Personality conflict. In another story, he's on a ship home. In this one, Colonel Gerald Thomas tells him to stay and fix a problem the memos call operations. The line is simple. The island is not. Standard infantry tactics fail in jungle war. 17 patrols gone in 3 weeks. Hundreds lost in September. The division cannot afford courage at this exchange rate. Whaling walks the perimeter, watches patrols leave, counts who returns. He times steps between clearings. He listens to canteens click, to branches answer boots, to the jungle repeating small mistakes in a voice the enemy understands. He looks back at the paper we're touching, and chooses a different math. If facing the jungle kills us, stop facing it. If squads draw fire by being squads, send pairs. If noise is death, make silence a weapon. If the enemy hunts patrols, train men who can hunt hunters. Manuals speak in certainty. Whaling speaks in care. He won't promise victory. He promises fewer stretchers. He will search for men raised where weather teaches patience, hunters and trappers who learn to move without arguing with grass. He will strip away every clink and shine, tape down metal, wrap cloth around hooks, trade hard soles for soft ones. He will teach marksmanship that ignores rifle range neatness, reading wind in vines, firing from mud and shadow. The file prefers the past tense. The choice lives between lines like breath on glass. It is a quiet rebellion, obedience to the only honest thing left, survival. What changes a war is rarely a trumpet. Often it is a canvas tent near an airstrip where a tired man says, "The way we've always done it is killing us," and the room goes still. Picture a map, a lantern, a coffee tin, and eyes learning new math. If discipline kills faster than bullets here, which do we keep? He isn't asking. Permission. He is asking for volunteers. The report will later say a scout sniper detachment was organized. It won't record the moment the jungle taught him that invisible soldiers live longer than brave ones, or that the division kept him because he refused to accept arithmetic as destiny. It won't tell you the first lesson was silence, but you can hear it if you hold the paper close. Flies, canvas dragging, the breath a man swallows so it won't be the last sound he makes. You can feel a different story cutting under the one the typewriter believes. Patrol of 7 failed to return, 4 recovered. If those numbers are all we keep, we'll lose the names. And if we lose the names, we'll make the same trade again. So here's the promise. We will open the lines this file tried to close. We will follow a decision that began as a whisper and became a doctrine. We will enter a jungle where courage learned to be quiet. Some victories don't arrive with fanfare. They arrive when a man teaches other men to disappear. And if disappearing is what saves them, who gets remembered? The numbers line up too neatly, as if the jungle respected arithmetic. It doesn't. 17 patrols gone in 3 weeks. That line appears again and again, stamped with dates that march like a drum you can't stop. You could read it as attrition, inevitable, regrettable, expected. But if inevitability is honest, why does it feel like a bookkeeping trick? Why do the reports rhyme even when the terrain screams in prose? Whaling reads the stack the way a hunter reads sign. Each report uses the same vocabulary. Ambush, snipers, machine gun nests, heavy foliage, no visibility. Same nouns, same verbs, different names at the top. Patterns comfort staff officers. They terrify men who have to go back outside. If this is truly random, Why does it repeat? And if it isn't random, what are we refusing to see? There's a line the file never writes. Discipline is noisy. Squads move like squads. 12 men, fixed spacing, standard kit, metal on metal, doctrine in every step. Doctrine is a parade ground solved for symmetry. The jungle solves for sound. You can almost hear the difference. A canteen kisses a hook, a sling taps a buckle, a branch answers. Somewhere ahead, a patient finger moves from wood to trigger. The report converts that music into contact casualties, but the jungle heard a rehearsal and clapped once. Wailing stands where the stretchers turn and does the other arithmetic. He counts what the paper refuses to weigh, the slow bleed of initiative. The men were trained to ask permission from terrain that doesn't grant any. They looked for lines and lanes, the enemy looked for edges and angles. He tries to picture the ambush from the other side, how the Japanese let squads pass, waited for boots to step past mouths of fire, then opened behind them. The machine gun nest isn't a position. It's a decision you only see after you've already made it. 17 patrols, a staff voice says, like the phrase itself explains the month. Whaling turns the number in his hand and feels the burrs. If this were weather, it would be a front. If it were disease, we'd quarantine. If it were math, it wouldn't keep lying. The book says patrols must recon by presence. The jungle says recon by absence. The book says 10 eyes see more than 2. The jungle says 10 mistakes sound louder than 1 heartbeat. The book says bravery equals advance. The jungle says bravery equals patience you can't hear. He flips a page. Sniper activity. Officers targeted. Doctrine teaches leaders to lead from the front. The foliage teaches bullets to look for insignia. We keep putting rank where leaves tell trajectories to go. The report calls it unfortunate. The jungle calls it predictable. He walks the perimeter again that evening and listens with purpose. Boots crunch where soft soles could have learned to yield. Webbing hisses when tape could have shut it up. Rifles hang like bells. If obedience makes you audible, what does survival demand? There's a small sentence in one after-action note. Patrol detected at 5 yards. 5 yards is not detection. It's a verdict. 5 yards means you were already inside the story the enemy wrote for you. The men followed every regulation that kept them alive on a range and led them to ruin in a rainforest. The file says enemy moved like ghosts. Ghosts don't move. They wait until you explain yourself with noise. He writes nothing. He draws a column instead. What we control, what the jungle punishes. In the first, spacing, kit, pace, route choice, who carries what. In the second, rattle, shine, silhouette, predictability, pride. Pride is the worst. Pride believes the map over the mud. Pride thinks bravery is volume. Pride dies standing. The math is stretching toward a cliff, 400 men in a month. At that rate, the division will run out of infantry before the enemy runs out of leaves. The staff language says acceptable losses. Acceptable to whom? Acceptable for what? Acceptable until when? Arithmetic is not a virtue. It's a warning wrapped in manners. A private walks past with tape spiraled around his canteen hook. Someone taught himself quiet. Another has wrapped cloth around a metal buckle. Someone else has traded a clacking sling for one that bites and holds. The file will never name them, but the jungle noticed, and that is the only promotion that matters here. Whaling looks again at the reports that insist on sameness and writes a single sentence in his head. We are being hunted because we make sense. Hunters do not make sense, they make choices. Hunters move at right angles to habit. Hunters trust the eye and the ear more than the book. The book can trail behind if it wants credit later. The anomaly isn't a single ambush or a sudden collapse. The anomaly is that nothing changes while everything dies. The after-action language is so calm it becomes immoral. Patrol failed to locate enemy position. The enemy position didn't fail to locate the patrol. He starts to say it out loud, not to a room, not as a speech, just to the paper that refuses to confess. We have to become harder to hear than the rain. That means pairs, not squads. It means maps drawn by hands that smell like swamp. It means marksmanship that ignores wind flags for vines. It means silence you have to practice like an instrument until you forget you're playing. It also means doubt. Doubt is not weakness here. It's a sense, like touch. If doctrine can't feel the air, people have to. He thinks of the stretchers. He thinks of the line, 17 patrols, and decides the real number is 1. The next one, the only patrol he can change. The file will summarize the solution later in a clean noun, detachment, but solutions are born as questions. The hardest one is this: what if obedience is the ambush? If it is, then the only honorable order is the one that listens first. The jungle doesn't care if you agree. It only cares if you arrive loudly. And today, the paper is loud. The file likes nouns that sound finished: doctrine, procedure, infantry tactics. As if names could settle arguments the jungle keeps reopening. Context is what those nouns hide. It is 1942, and much of the Marine Corps still thinks in straight lines. Platoon columns, squad wedges, fire and maneuver across open ground, maps that make sense on a blackboard where the trees are erased. On Guadalcanal, the trees erase you back. The culture behind the paper is older than the island. A generation trained for trenches became a generation teaching trenches, range tables, parade cadence, command voice. The Corps prides itself on discipline that cuts crystal clean across noise, but noise is exactly what the jungle punishes. Command wants clarity. The canopy grants confusion. The contradiction isn't abstract, it stacks on stretchers. Whaling is not a theorist. He is a man who watched Nicaragua's bush swallow patrols and France's fields punish flags. A World War I veteran with a silver star that does not impress the trees. He carries an older lesson you can't print on a memo. The invisible live longer than the brave. When Colonel Gerald Thomas keeps him on the island and says, "Think about our jungle problem," Thomas is appointing an apostate to the pulpit. Fix it, but don't break what we believe about ourselves. General Alexander Vandegrift is practical the way survival is practical. He listens. Rogers Rangers from a different century flickers at the edge of his thinking. Small mobile teams, independent, behind enemy lines. That reference is a permission slip with dust on it. It says the institution once knew how to bless the unorthodox. There's another ghost in the file. The Marine Scout Sniper program disbanded after the last war, folded away as if the need had been defeated with the enemy. Skills retire when memory does. On paper, the capability doesn't exist. In the jungle, the lack is audible. Systems do what they were built to do. The current one produces squads that look perfect from the air and sound inevitable from 10 yards. Training stamps identical movements into bodies: step, rattle, breathe, speak. The rifle range teaches wind without vines, distance without humidity, targets without intelligence. The bayonet course cheers noise. The manual canonizes coordination. All of it is beautiful. All of it is lethal here. Whaling's heresy is specific. He reframes the mission from be seen and dominate to be unseen and decide. Reconnaissance should not prove presence. It should create choices. He begins with selection because culture enters with the man. He reads service records like terrain, hunting background, rural work, marksmanship beyond the range, disciplinary notes that look less like cowardice and more like independence. Men who will question a plan quietly and finish a task loudly. He is not recruiting saints, he is recruiting senses. Look at the list he drafts in his head. Fieldcraft over formation. Formation is for parades. Fieldcraft is for life. Pairs over platoons. 2 men can pass where 12 invent their own enemy. Silence over speed. If haste makes noise, noise makes funerals. Thinking over telling. Orders are a starting line, not a script. This is not romance. It is arithmetic that listens. The first institutional friction is language. The request sounds wrong in the room that approves it. Volunteers for reconnaissance and ambush reads, to some ears, like an admission that regular infantry cannot do its job. That is not the confession. The confession is that the job was defined by the wrong environment. Vandegrift signs anyway, because the bodies are persuasive in ways Doctrine cannot argue against. Organize a scout sniper unit. The sentence lands in the file with no evidence of the air it displaced, but you can imagine it. The brief glance, the unspoken risk, the tacit agreement that failure will be personal and success will belong to the division. That is how systems hire change. They rent it first. Training is the second friction. There are no manuals for what he is building. Manuals are retrospectives. He needs an invention. He starts with silence because the jungle grades sound. He requires men to walk 100 yards without commentary from their kit. On day 1, metal speaks. By day 3, Cloth wraps metal, tape domesticates webbing, soft souls learn to forgive roots. You cannot write silence into a syllabus. You demonstrate it until the air forgets you. Marksmanship comes next, but not as marksmanship knows itself. No pits, no flags, no benches, no comfortable angles. Estimate distance by how the ground behaves, not by a number sign. Read wind in leaves, humidity in the way a vine moves when you brush past. Fire uphill, downhill, from mud, from shadow, from positions ace. Range officer would call untidy, and the enemy would call invisible. Accuracy here is not a group on paper, it is a target that never knew you were present. The third friction is authority. Squads teach accountability through rank and proximity. Pairs teach accountability through results. It is easier to grade obedience than judgment. Whaling trains judgment, map reading that is not tracing routes but recognizing stories the ground is telling, terrain analysis that recognizes where eyes will go and where ears can't, sketching that disciplines memory to keep only what matters. He wants men who can get lost without being lost. You can feel the institution bristle. Autonomy sounds like unruliness. The compromise is operational, small teams with clear intents, tight debrief cycles, intelligence that pays for independence up front. If an officer fears silence, give him a map back before noon. Systems accept what they can count. The context is not only marine. The enemy's system fits the island. Japanese patrols move short and listen long. Snipers treat insignia like targets printed in red. Machine guns sit just past where Doctrine says they should. A bunker in Europe is a place. In this canopy, it is a time. 30 seconds after you pass, they let you succeed first, then they begin. Our system meets theirs and loses, not for lack of courage, but for lack of compatibility. Whaling's proposal is less about romance and more about translation. Translate command intent into behaviors the jungle respects. Translate bravery from noise into patience. Translate reconnaissance from presence proved into absence maintained. The why is mercy in uniform, fewer dead men to memorize. General Vandegrift's approval is not a flourish, it is an institutional hinge. A chief of staff keeps an officer others would have shipped home. A general reaches backward to Rogers to authorize a future that looks suspicious to the present. The core does not change by speech, it changes by permission to try. Context is also cost. When a system shifts, someone pays. Men will go behind lines without rescue promised. Teams will carry doubt like a tool. A commander will accept decisions made out of sight. The doctrine will gain scars it will later describe as wisdom. The file will call it standardized months from now and forget the uncertainty that birthed it. There is a last piece, the human object this section wants but the file cannot provide. Imagine a rank strip pinned to a blouse and then taped over, brightness suffocated so a sniper cannot read it. That is what this context is. Tape on a tradition, not to insult it, but to let it live longer in a place where shine kills. Systems are beautiful when they work. On Guadalcanal, beauty must learn to whisper, so the system bends, not breaks, bends. Enough to allow a man to pick volunteers from records that sound like wilderness, enough to let teams of two slip where squads had announced themselves, enough to let silence count as action, enough to rebrand survival as doctrine. And somewhere between Henderson Field and a dark line on a wet map, the Marine Corps begins to remember an older truth it once knew and briefly forgot, that sometimes the most disciplined thing a soldier can do is to disappear on purpose. The first lesson is silence, and silence has homework. Day 1, west of Henderson Field. 100 yards, Whaling says. No sound. 12 men step off like a page turning. 10 steps in, the jungle takes roll. Canteen on hook, sling on buckle, webbing on metal, a boot that believes roots will move for it. A branch remembers their names out loud. Back to the start. Strip what speaks. Tape eats shine. Cloth pacifies hooks. Soft soles replace hardness that announces duty like a drum. Rifles ride in palms instead of hanging like bells. Breathing becomes deliberate. Lower, slower, learned. Silence is not absence. It is a craft. By the third day, half of them can travel 100 yards and leave only the air disturbed. The other half learn why discipline and shame are cousins. You keep trying until the trees stop answering. The file will one day write, trained in stalking, which is true in the way a photograph is true. The moving part is missing, the part where a man unlearns being a squad and remembers being an animal. Marksmanship arrives without its usual furniture. No benches, no flags, no perfect sight pictures cut from a manual. Range math meets weather and becomes humility. Distance must be estimated by slope, by how water runs out of the turn of a leaf, by how a clearing looks when heat is lifting. Wind is not a number. Wind is what the fern says to itself when you aren't supposed to be listening. Humidity steals speed. Gravity is a rumor until the ground makes it law. They shoot uphill and downhill because the island refuses a level conversation. They shoot from mud so the body learns the weight of patience. They shoot from shadow to understand what contrast does to eyes and nerves. Someone flinches, someone doesn't. The scorebook cannot record fear, only where it lands. Whaling teaches another arithmetic. A bullet is a message. What do you want the enemy to learn, and when should he learn it? If the answer is nothing and never, the shot must be the last sound the target ever hears. Accuracy isn't tight groups. Accuracy is not starting a conversation you cannot finish. Pairs, not squads. A pair is a promise. See what I don't, hear what I can't, and do not let the ground betray us. Rank looks smaller when the jungle is the audience. Authority migrates toward competence. The senior man is the one who knows which vine means water has been here lately. Map reading becomes story reading. Do not trace the road. Sketch the problem. Where will someone with your doctrine put a machine gun? Where are you most audible? Where will the enemy wait for the version of you that still believes in parade ground geometry? Draw that, then go another way. They begin a lexicon of quiet, the difference between a footfall and a foot's arrival, between gear that sits and gear that rests, between eyes that look and eyes that measure. A hand touches a branch and decides to wait for the wind to move before the body moves, because the leaves should not have two reasons to stir at once. At night, whaling asks different questions. Not how far did you get, but what did you miss getting there? Not what did you see, but what would have seen you if it had been watching. The answers are rarely satisfying. That is the point. Doubt is a new organ. They will need it more than muscle. The manual would prefer checklists. The jungle prefers senses. Men who grew up hunting bring old habits into a new uniform. How to stare at nothing until nothing blinks first. How to feel the weight of a hillside. How to be more patient than hunger. Others borrow the habits and find out patience can be taught like a language if you live in it long enough. The math improves. Shots land from 400 yards with iron sights when the wind is a whisper and the heart is an instrument you know how to tune. Movement becomes negotiation, not declaration. A pair can pass within 20 yards of a position built to kill squads, because squads require space and predictability, and pairs require neither. Human does not improve as fast as math. Fear does not attend lectures. It has to be spoken to in the voice it understands, repetition. The men learn to wait for their pulse to fall into a rhythm the trigger will forgive. They learn that a throat swallows at the most wrong time, so they make swallowing a decision instead of a reflex. They learn what the jungle sounds like when it accepts them, and what it sounds like when it does not. And that second sound is expensive. A private asks the question everybody asks alone. How quiet is enough? The answer is the only honest one, quieter than the mistake you haven't met yet. They practice losing and finding, get turned around on purpose, then make the land reintroduce itself. The sun hides, so learn the language of moss and the river's gossip and how ants tell time. You cannot be lost if you are busy recognizing. Equipment lags doctrine. The Corps issues what it has. Springfields that remember another war, rations that taste like bureaucracy, camo that is a suggestion. The men modify, barter, invent. They kink metal so it stops singing. They cut cloth where chafe becomes noise. They treat maintenance as a moral duty. You cannot ask a weapon to be silent if you don't speak its dialect. A small ritual emerges before movement. Fingers walk webbing, testing for treachery. A palm rides the stock to measure weather through wood. Two men share a look that means we remember the same rules, and we will break them if the island demands it. That is not insubordination. That is conversation with a place that kills sentences that end in certainty. The first time a pair passes within 10 yards of a Japanese patrol without drawing breath louder than leaves, the file will later call it successful infiltration. It feels less like success and more like permission. The jungle nodded, barely. The men do not celebrate. They have learned the cost of being noticed. Whaling watches more than he speaks. He counts seconds between footfalls, the way he once counted stretchers. The second number is flaens. The new arithmetic does not announce itself. It accumulates until the old math looks barbaric. He keeps one phrase and uses it until it stops being metaphor. Invisible soldiers live longer than brave ones. He does not mean cowardice. He means bravery that waits and chooses, bravery that treats noise as betrayal, bravery that loves the men on either side enough to come back unsung. There is a moment every class reaches where the training changes from performance to belief. Someone who once loved the parade ground pivot now loves the pause. Someone who once measured progress in yards now measures it in the air not disturbed. Someone who once waited for orders now brings back a map you can trust more than his voice. That is the mini-climax that produces none of the trumpet and all of the survival. By October 10th, the best shots are true at 400 yards with iron sights. The best feet are quieter than doubt. The best eyes can sketch a machine gun nest they never fired at, and the sketch will be enough to move a battalion the next morning without bleeding for the lesson. The math is ready. The human is as ready as humans get. The jungle remains unimpressed. Good. Respect keeps you alive. A dispatch arrives. Matanakau, Japanese guns built where the book would not put them. The regular patrols have been paying the toll for 2 months. Vandegrift wants locations, not heroics. Intelligence, not noise. Choice, not proof. Pairs check tape. Springs whisper to cloth. Someone exhales a long promise and lets it cool. The file will later say, teams departed at 0400. We will say it another way. Men walked into the green with math in their pockets and humanity in their throats, asking the island to let them pass long enough to change a battle. The jungle held its breath. The file calls it Operation on the Matanakau River, October 13th to 15th, 1942. Cold language for something that still smells like smoke. 4 teams, 8 men total, 40 pounds each, rifle, rations, compass, silence. They move out before dawn, the kind of darkness that isn't empty but crowded. Ahead, the jungle hums with insects and waiting rifles. Behind them, the division holds its breath. Their orders are simple in theory, impossible in practice. Move into enemy lines, find artillery, find command posts, do not be found. If caught, no rescue, Whaling told them himself. He never uses the word sacrifice. He prefers precision. We're not dying, he said. We're learning fast enough to stay ahead of death. Team 1 moves west. Along the Matanakau for 3 hours, twin shadows under the trees. The air smells like iron. At 0715, they spot 4 Type 92 howitzers under camouflage netting, 60 Japanese soldiers, orderly as a textbook. The Marines sketch positions, count crates, mark bearings. Their pencils shake less than their hands. By noon, they're back. Intelligence lives. Team 2 finds a machine gun nest above a crossing. Team 3 maps patrol routes. Team 4 walks into trouble. 2 Marines, 50 yards from a Japanese patrol. 5 soldiers. Eyes meet eyes through leaves. The air stops. A rifle raises. A heartbeat later, a single shot folds 1 man into the mud. The forest explodes. Whistles, shouts, the swarm. The 2 Marines run, east, toward the invisible line that separates duty from doom. 40 minutes of pursuit. You can almost feel lungs scrape the air raw. When they stumble into Marine positions, 11 Japanese are still chasing them. The line holds. The men collapse. The maps survive. Whaling lays the sketches across a table under a lantern. The table is the room this story will remember. Maps, mud still drying, dotted with pencil notations. Enemy artillery here, machine guns here, patrols here. 2 miles of information regular patrols couldn't buy in blood. General Vandegrift bends over the table. He doesn't speak for several seconds, the silence thick enough to have temperature. Then he changes the offensive plan on the spot. No more frontal assaults. The scouts will lead flanking maneuvers, invisible first, infantry after. This is the moment, the instant a whisper becomes doctrine. Whaling doesn't celebrate. He looks at the men outside, the ones washing mud from their boots, the ones still learning to walk without noise. He understands something the file will not. Survival has to be taught faster than the system can forget. The next morning, October 16th, the scouts cross again, 3 miles upstream, deeper this time. No maps worth trusting, no trails left unbooby-trapped. They move through green walls, measuring distance by pulse. At Duro 920, they find a Japanese command post, 6 officers over maps, 15 soldiers around them. The scouts wait until the cluster tightens, then 2 shots, a pause, another 2. 4 officers drop. Confusion fills the rest. The Marines fade before anyone can count how many ghosts were real. Half an hour later, another team finds a forward observer calling artillery. 1 shot at 300 yards ends his sentence. The Marine infantry advances 600 yards before the enemy realizes its eyes are gone. By noon, Whaling's men have crawled 2 miles behind Japanese lines without losing one of their own. They cut communication wires, mark targets for artillery, guide flanking companies like invisible hands. In the command tent, the atmosphere turns. Maps are no longer certainties, but arguments. For the first time, the enemy looks disoriented. The file will later call it tactical success due to reconnaissance initiative. What it means: a handful of quiet men change the sound of the war. The battle lasts 4 days. 750 Japanese die in encirclement. Marine losses: 43 killed, 112 wounded. Numbers on opposite ends of a scale that had been broken for weeks. Vandegrift calls it proof. Whaling calls it math, finally listening to reason. On October 8th, a mortar shell lands too close. Whaling catches shrapnel in the side. The report says, non-critical wound. Infection disagrees. 3 days later, Fever forces evacuation to a hospital ship. He will miss the rest of the Guadalcanal campaign. The unit continues. The Doctrine lives. Before leaving, he gathers his men one last time. The smell of antiseptic and salt lingers. His voice is thin but precise. You proved what silence can do, he tells them. Now make sure the Corps doesn't forget how to listen. They salute, but not the parade kind. It's quieter. The kind that means we understood. When he boards the stretcher, one of his sergeants folds the latest sketch map and slips it under the pillow. No signature, no caption, just a line of pencil fading at the edge. The nurse doesn't notice until later. The paper is damp from sweat. The ink smudges into something almost like camouflage. That map will end up in headquarters files labeled Training Reference Material. The handwriting will fade until it looks printed. Future Marines will trace its lines without realizing they're touching the work of men who invented a language made of patience. The room is empty now, but the realization remains in the air that discipline and silence aren't opposites. They're synonyms misunderstood by noise. The system learns slowly. Bureaucracy calls him rehabilitated. The Corps will later call him pioneer. The men who survived will call him Bill. They'll keep calling him that even when they teach his methods to others, because the name holds something the title lost: human scale. In February 1944, the Legion of Merit citation will read that he organized and supervised the training of scout sniper detachments whose instruction contributed immeasurably to success achieved by Marine patrols. It will not mention that he learned everything by counting who didn't come back. He will heal, command again, earn new medals. But the real legacy is arithmetic. 7 patrols in, 4 out, that math is gone. Invisible soldiers live longer than brave ones. It sounds colder than it is. What it really means, bravery is no longer measured by how loud you charge, but by how long you can make the world forget you're there until it's safe again. The lantern on the table goes out. The file gains another paragraph. The room stays. And somewhere between those two truths, the Marine Corps begins to change its definition of courage, from movement that makes noise to presence that doesn't need to. The realization is complete. The Doctrine has a heartbeat. The paper calls it reconnaissance. The men called it coming home alive. The file adds a sentence. The island subtracts a man. That is how aftermath begins. Lieutenant Colonel William Whaling, evacuated. Wounds non-critical. The word non-critical is anesthesia for paper. Infection does not read. He leaves on a stretcher through air that smells like salt and iodine, a hand over his ribs as if holding Doctrine inside. On deck, the hospital ship lists gently, and for the first time in months, the jungle cannot argue. Somewhere behind him, pairs slip into green and bring back choices instead of names for telegrams. The arithmetic has changed. The file has not learned how to celebrate without sounding guilty. Headquarters needs tidy cause and effect. It drafts an order. Continue scout sniper training under division supervision. The phrasing is careful, as if the idea had always belonged to the institution. Invisible credit fits the theme. There is a ledger no one prints, who got to keep living because a whisper became a tactic. Guadalcanal's endgame confirms it. Flanking action succeeded with minimal losses following reconnaissance. Minimal is a word you can only use after you've bled enough to earn it. Convalescence rewrites a man. Wailing heals slowly, the way jungle wounds prefer. He reads reports from a cot, pencil tapping at the margins, tracing what's missing from sentences that are perfectly adequate for award boards and useless for memory. Where is the pause? Where's the waiting? Where's the map that looks like a hand sketch because it is? A citation arrives months later, the Legion of Merit. It mentions organizing and supervising instruction and how it contributed immeasurably. The language is correct the way a eulogy is correct, beautiful, brief, and slightly afraid of facts that breathe. Doctrine spreads by rumor first, order later. Scout sniper detachments multiply, 1st Marines, 5th Marines, then across regiments that would have rejected the idea a season ago. Manuals appear, retrofitting wisdom into bullet points. Noise discipline, fire discipline, stalk lanes, field sketching. You can teach a page to say patience. You cannot make it wait. The Corps is proud in a way that keeps pride from becoming noise. Guadalcanal is over. Another island waits. The system files the success under lessons learned and moves the lamp to a new table. The room is different. The realization follows. There is a cost to how institutions remember. They are built to prefer nouns to names. Scout sniper program blooms. Bill Whaling counting stretchers fades. The Corps is not ungrateful. It is merely busy. War consumes attention and pays back with history after it is done with you. In 1944, somewhere far from Henderson Field, a captain named Frank Tachovsky flips through disciplinary records with the same skepticism Whaling once reserved for after-action reports. The Navy brig on Saipan has menakenth. Paperwork calls problems, and the island calls resources. Tachovsky hears the same jungle grammar, silence, patience, a willingness to think before orders catch up, and decides to recruit at the edge of the page. He does not use Whaling's name in his request. He uses Whaling's idea without knowing it. Select for senses, not salutes. He builds a unit of 40 that the Corps will later nickname the 40 Thieves. Forgive the romance. The job description is uglier and therefore more honest. Silent entry, short violence, shorter footprints. The file's phrasing evolves. What used to be detachment becomes scout sniper platoon. The verbs solidify, infiltrate, locate, neutralize, withdraw. Doctrine has accepted the quiet. Meanwhile, bureaucratic gravity tugs at the story. Official histories allocate space. Campaign summaries compress. A paragraph covers months. The men who learn to be ghosts become footnotes next to divisions whose patches are easier to print. It is not malice. It is a limitation of paper pretending to be a memory. Whaling returns to duty. He will plan, command, and stand in rooms where maps sweat, and he will rarely be introduced as the man who taught silence to wear chevrons. He doesn't ask. He doesn't correct. Good ideas are happiest when they belong to everyone. You can still find hints if you look with the right eyes. Training schedules from 1943 that list stalking lanes, sketch drills, camo tests, range logs that include downhill fire as if gravity needed official permission, diagrams with shadows boxed in pencil labeled bad contrast, a note, wait for cloud. The handwriting is anonymous and familiar. Aftermath always comes with a shadow called cover-up, not conspiracy with cigars and folders, something softer and more ordinary, the way success erases the cost of getting there. On paper, the Marine Corps simply adapted. In the bodies, men learned to swallow fear in measured sips and step when the wind spoke, not when a whistle did. The night before his fever broke for good, a nurse changed Whaling's dressings and asked what he did before the war. "I hunted," he said. It wasn't resume, it was grammar. Later, asked by a journalist about the invention of scout snipers, he shrugged. Old ideas with new reasons. That answer is correct and inadequate. Humility hides as well as doctrine. If you want to see the cover-up, read the cleanest summaries. They never mention how long the first 100-yard silence took to learn. They don't say that pairs would lie face down for hours until their ears knew the difference between leaf and lizard. They don't include the part where a corporal taped over his own stripes because brightness had a sniper's favorite shape. The file lists outcomes. The men remember the prices. Tachovsky's 40 Thieves will repay the loan with interest on Saipan, crawling through coral cuts, marking caves instead of dying to prove they were there, slipping past. Sentries with breath tuned to surf. The Corps will make room for their legend because legends are easier to market than lectures about silence. But underneath the headline lives Whaling's arithmetic, choices over proof. That is the debt chain. That is the lineage paper resists drawing with a solid line. There is another kind of cover-up. The one-time exalts until it forgets. 80 years later, the Scout Sniper MOS will be deactivated. The announcement will use phrases like reorganization and capability preserved by other means. Paper closes circles neatly. The jungle never did. Legacy is an argument conducted between what worked then and what a budget believes now. What matters, if you listen past the nouns, is that a private today still tapes a buckle, still checks a sling for betrayal, still waits for the wind to move and then moves with it. The doctrine survived by becoming a habit nobody feels the need to cite. Aftermath is full of small mercies, mothers who never received telegrams written in the word missing, Marines who grew old and told no one why they could not sleep if the house ticked too loudly, officers who stopped demanding noise as proof of courage, a general who once paused over a map and discovered that silence had handwriting. Cover-up, the gentle kind, is also full of small thefts, one name replaced by a noun, one room remembered as a paragraph, one whisper credited to a program. The world is busy, stories are long. Paper prefers brevity, men prefer breath. Whaling's file ends without drama, transfers, later commands, post-war dates, no appendix titled arithmetic that saved lives, no photograph of the first 100-yard silence, no sketch with sweat dried into the corner. If you want those, you have to visit the places where the Corps keeps cardboard boxes and let dust teach you not to cough. So what is the verdict here, before verdicts are allowed? Aftermath gave the Corps a language it didn't know it needed. Cover-up translated that language back into institution, sanding off fingerprints so the tool would pass inspection. That is not a crime. It is how large things keep moving forward. Still, it leaves a question you can't file. When a whisper becomes policy, who signs the whisper? If the answer is no one, then maybe the right memorial isn't a name on a wall, but a habit that refuses to go extinct. Somewhere on Saipan, Tachovsky is teaching men how to let rocks think they are rocks. Somewhere on another island, a young officer opens a folder that smells like someone else's rain and decides to trust the line that was never typed. Be quiet, be patient, be first to know. The file calls this period stabilization. The men called it coming home alive more often. Both are true. Only one feels like breath. Files end, wars don't. They taper into habits, into men who check a buckle twice without remembering who taught them, into training notes that sound like common sense because someone paid extra for the ikoa. Sentence. Whaling's name slides down the page as the program rises up it. Tachovsky's 40 Thieves step into a chapter the Corps prefers to remember in silhouettes and nicknames. Later generations inherit a tool without the fingerprint. That is one kind of victory. It keeps people alive. It is also one kind of loss. It forgets why the tool was built. Maybe the right way to measure a life in uniform is not by medals or mentions, but by quieter arithmetic. How many mothers never met a telegram because a man chose silence over swagger? How many maps lost their appetite for red lines because a pair of boots let the wind move first? We ask history to be fair. History answers with paperwork. Paper is honest about outcomes and shy about breath. The breath is here, though, if you hold the folder close enough. The lungs of 2 Marines after 40 minutes of being hunted, the room where pencil sketches changed an offensive, the pause before a general amended a plan because silence had done the loudest speaking. What do we owe men who made themselves invisible on purpose? At minimum, we owe them not to confuse invisibility with absence. At best, we owe them the courtesy of unsealing what their work sealed for others, graves that never filled, rooms that never had to be built, names that stayed where names belong. On mail, on doorways, in futures. The Corps will reorganize. Programs will come and go. Acronyms will molt. Budgets will pick winners. That is the surface weather of institutions. The climate below it is simpler and older. Be quiet enough to hear what tries to kill you. Be patient enough to choose when to answer. Be exact enough that someone else gets to go home. If the official term for that skill set changes, Banzai. Legation does not. There is a second verdict, the human one. Courage is not volume. It is not the footage of a charge or the sound of metals clacking on a lectern. Courage is a pair of men who accept being forgotten as individuals, so a battalion can be remembered as alive. Courage is a wounded officer who leaves the island with a doctrine wrapped under his ribs and tells the men he trained to keep teaching long after the citation is read and filed. If you want a monument, try this. The next time you hear leaves move, wait for the wind to make the first move back. That small patience is a memorial the jungle would recognize. So we close the folder with a promise. We will call things by the names they earned. We will not let program replace people. We will follow the line from Whaling's quiet arithmetic to Tachovsky's hard decisions and into whatever name the skill wears next. We will leave space in our sentences for the pause that saved lives. And we will ask you, listening now, to place your own verdict beside ours. If silence can be a kind of discipline, if patience can be a kind of valor, what kind of memory do they deserve? A. Let the file stand. Trust that outcomes are thanks enough. B. Say their names. Keep telling the story until the tools remember who built them. Tell us which you choose. Comment, Saipan, 1944. If this story reached you. If you want to see where this arithmetic met a different kind of ledger, where a prisoner's discipline fed a guard and an ideology ran out of excuses, open the next file with us. Thuringia, 1945. Some victories survive loud. The important ones survive as whispers someone cared to repeat. Thank you for listening, slowly, the way a jungle demands.